You're not lazy, you're overstimulated. Today on Psycast, we're going to explore what happens when the mind is no longer tired, but flooded. This episode is presented in podcast format, with subtitles to support your listening and understanding. Let me ask you something you might have thought but never said out loud. What if your problem isn't laziness? What if it's exhaustion from too much? Too much noise, too many choices, too many tabs open, not just on your screen, but inside your head. Because sometimes we don't want to do anything. Not because we're weak or unmotivated, but because everything already feels like too much before the day even starts. This feeling of waking up and already feeling done is more common than we think. And it's not just tiredness. It's not just a lack of discipline. It's the weight of 1,000 unfinished thoughts mixed with a constant pressure to be online, responsive, productive, informed, present, and improving, all at once. No wonder you feel paralyzed. No wonder your body says no when everything around you says go. It's not a malfunction. It's a defense mechanism. It's your nervous system raising a white flag, whispering, I can't take anymore. We live in a world of hyperstimulation. It's like standing in a room where everyone is yelling, not with their voices, but with their content. Every scroll is another burst of color, another piece of bad news, another life to compare yours with. Even our rest has become performative. Even silence feels like something we have to earn. This is where I want to pause with you, not to fix anything, but to notice what's really happening. Because you're not broken. You're responding to something real. You're responding to a world that never shuts up. There's a quote I once heard from Jung that stayed with me. A man who has not passed through the inferno of his passions has never overcome them. In other words, if we don't become conscious of what's consuming us, if we don't sit with it, feel it, name it, it owns us. And in today's world, one of the greatest fires we walk through is the constant stimulation of our attention. You are not lazy for wanting less. You are not weak for needing stillness. That need is ancient. It's the nervous system's way of coming back home. Maybe no one ever told you this, but your mind was never designed to take in everything, all the time. There's a limit, not just of time or energy, but of emotional space. And when that space gets filled up day after day with fragments of 1,000 lives, expectations, tragedies, jokes, arguments, plans, dreams that aren't yours, something inside you quietly begins to retreat. You stop reaching. You stop caring. You stop moving. Not because you don't want life, but because it stopped feeling like something you can hold. It's too fast, too much, and deep down, it stopped feeling like yours. You begin to lose the thread of your own story. I've felt this before. That strange fog that settles in when every task feels heavier than it should, when every choice feels like a burden. You open your phone just to escape, and hours later, you realize you weren't escaping. You were just getting lost. And there's a quiet grief in that. We weren't made for this level of stimulation. The brain, as incredible as it is, still runs on ancient wiring. It's the same brain that once found silence in forests, rhythm in walking, presence in firelight. And now it's being asked to process wars, heartbreak, memes, injustice, fashion trends, and 100 opinions, all before breakfast. You're not lazy, you're overstimulated. And the worst part is that overstimulation often mimics the symptoms of laziness: procrastination, forgetfulness, lack of motivation, emotional numbness. But inside, it's not apathy, it's shutdown. Byung-Chul Han, the philosopher who wrote The Burnout Society, said something that explains this beautifully. He wrote that we are no longer in a time of external oppression. We are in a time of internalized pressure. Today, each of us is an entrepreneur of the self. We exploit ourselves and call it freedom. That line shook me when I first read it, because it names something we feel but don't know how to say. That much of our suffering today comes not from others, but from within. From the way we believe we always have to be on, always improving, always optimizing. There's no space to just be. And here's the irony. In a world that tells you that you're free, many of us feel more trapped than ever. Trapped in habits we didn't choose. Trapped in timelines we never wanted. trapped in screens that promise connection but deliver comparison, trapped in a cycle where every pause feels like a failure. But I want to tell you this, gently, there's nothing wrong with you for feeling this way. In fact, what you're feeling might be the most human response possible to an inhuman pace. Let's stay with that idea for a little longer, that your exhaustion is a signal, not a flaw. It's your body's way of saying, I've had enough. It's your nervous system whispering, then pleading, then shutting down. And the tragedy is, we often hear that whisper and think, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just get things done? But maybe the better question is, what have I been carrying that no one can see? Because here's the quiet truth most people won't say out loud. Sometimes the hardest part of life isn't doing the work. It's pretending you're okay when you're not. It's smiling when you're unraveling. It's opening your phone and being hit with 5 different worlds screaming for your attention when you barely have energy to manage your own. We're not made to process this much, this fast, this often. And yet we wake up, plug in, scroll, absorb, react, compare, distract. And we call that a normal day. But normal doesn't always mean natural. There's a difference between what the world expects from you and what your soul actually needs. And if you go long enough ignoring that need for stillness, for boundaries, for silence, your soul starts sending louder and louder messages. Until one day, what you call laziness is really just survival. Your system has hit its capacity. Think of a glass of water. You can only pour so much into it before it overflows. But the overflow doesn't mean the glass is broken, it just means it's full. You are full, not weak, not broken, full. And the question becomes, what have you been filling your inner life with? What kind of noise are you waking up to? What kind of pressure have you internalized so deeply that even rest feels like guilt? Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So maybe the invitation here isn't to try harder. Maybe it's to notice more, to become conscious of the invisible things that are shaping how tired you feel. To pause long enough to ask, who am I without the noise? What would it feel like to do nothing, not as failure, but as healing? And here's something I believe with my whole being. Stillness is not the enemy. It's the medicine. But it's hard to take that medicine in a world that glorifies busyness, that measures worth by productivity, and that calls anyone who slows down lazy. So maybe we need a new word, a new language for what it means to pause. Because you're not being lazy. You're responding to life with the sensitivity of someone who still feels. And that, in itself, is a quiet kind of strength. Let me tell you something I once realized on a quiet morning when I couldn't bring myself to open another email or respond to another message. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, staring at the screen without touching it. And for the first time in a long time, I admitted it to myself. I don't want to do anything today. Not because I didn't care, but because everything felt like too much. Because I was tired of being reachable, tired of thinking about what I should post, what I should answer, what I should become. Because I missed silence. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of something deeper. The feeling of being with myself without having to explain or perform. And maybe you know that feeling too. That longing for a space where you don't have to be productive, impressive, or even okay. Just present. This is what overstimulation steals from us. It doesn't just take our attention. It takes our inner life. It replaces reflection with reaction. It replaces depth with speed. It replaces meaning with metrics. And slowly, it teaches us to distrust silence, to fear it. Because in silence, we meet ourselves. And if we've been avoiding what we really feel, that meeting can be uncomfortable. But it's also the only place where something real begins to return. That's why Jung's words matter so much here. Not just the ones everyone quotes, but the quieter ones. He once said, "Solitude is for me a fount of healing which makes my life worth living." He didn't say it was easy, but he knew that stepping away from the noise isn't escapism, it's return. Return to self, to center, to soul. You're allowed to want that. You're allowed to log off. You're allowed to stop responding for a while, not because you're abandoning the world, but because you're choosing not to abandon yourself. And yes, I know, the world doesn't make that easy. There's pressure in every direction. to stay informed, to keep up, to be seen, to be on. But just because the world moves fast doesn't mean you have to. There's a different kind of courage in slowing down, in saying, I choose peace over performance. I choose quiet over comparison. I choose to be even when I'm not doing. Because stillness isn't nothing. It's where we find everything we've been running from. So what does it look like to live from a quieter place in a world that never stops speaking? It doesn't mean becoming a hermit. It doesn't mean turning away from life. It means learning to protect your inner life like it matters, because it does. It means putting space between you and the next notification. It means asking, do I really need to take this in right now, before you let another voice into your head? It means treating your attention like something sacred, not to be spent lightly, not to be given to just anything that asks for it. Because here's something I've come to believe. Your attention is your life, and what you give it to, over days, over weeks, over years, becomes your story. If you spend it all reacting, you lose the thread of your own narrative. You become a character in other people's scripts. You wake up one day and realize you've been living someone else's idea of urgency, of success, of worth. But you can come back. You always can. It starts with the simplest thing, noticing. Noticing when you're overstimulated. Not with judgment, but with gentleness. Noticing what drains you and what restores you. Noticing that your worth doesn't disappear when you unplug. That your value isn't dependent on how much you do, how quickly you reply, or how much you produce. It's in your presence. It's in your awareness. It's in your ability to sit with yourself and not run. There's this idea in Stoic philosophy, especially from Epictetus, that we should never let what's outside of us disturb what's within. He said, no one is free who is not master of himself. And maybe that's what we're really seeking when we say we want to rest. Not just physical rest, but sovereignty, the right to return to ourselves. You are allowed to set limits, not because you're selfish, but because you're sensitive. You're allowed to rest, not because you've earned it, but because you exist. You're allowed to do nothing, not as a failure, but as a form of healing. You don't need to fight the whole world to feel peace. Sometimes all you need is to stop fighting yourself, to stop telling yourself that you should be able to handle more, to stop pretending you're fine when your nervous system is screaming for pause. And if no one ever gave you permission to slow down, I will, right now. You're allowed to stop, even just for today. And maybe today, that's all you needed to hear. That you're not broken for wanting quiet. That you're not lazy for feeling tired before the day even begins. That in a world where stimulation is constant and rest feels like rebellion, choosing to pause, to step back, to breathe, to do nothing at all is not weakness. It's wisdom. You're not falling behind. You're remembering how to move at the pace of your own breath. You're not failing. You're feeling. And in a society that rewards numbness, that alone is a sign of life. There's a kind of power that grows in silence. Not the loud, explosive kind, but the deep, steady kind. The kind that says, I don't need to chase every sound. I don't need to fix every feeling. I just need to come home to myself. So if the noise is too loud today, let it be. You don't have to respond to everything. You don't have to be available to everyone. You don't have to perform wellness or productivity or peace. You are allowed to be a quiet soul in a loud world. You are allowed to rest without apologizing. You are allowed to turn off the noise and listen to the whisper beneath it all. The part of you that's still whole, still breathing, still here, still you. Let me leave you with one final thought. One that might stay with you the next time the world feels too fast. Maybe the opposite of overstimulation isn't isolation. Maybe it's presence. Real, grounded, quiet presence. And maybe that's where healing begins. Not in doing more, but in learning to be with what is. To hold it gently, to breathe through it, to stop running from yourself. Today, you don't have to do anything. Just be here. That's enough.